Good evening and welcome to The Simple Truth. My name is Bob Dacy. Today is November the 26th, 2007. And the main thing we're going to talk about tonight is we have been forced by circumstances to come to the aid and the defense of the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, you see, ladies and gentlemen, the Supreme Court has agreed to take a Second Amendment case for the first time since 1939. And we're going to have to go over this because this has this does not augur well for the Republic. So we're going to have to do something we haven't done in years, which is give you an overview of the situation, the real reason for the Second Amendment, the whole 9 yards. That's going to be the main topic tonight. After that, we've got a police state alert and maybe a little bit about Ron Paul. But let's start with this business about the Second Amendment. The first thing you have to understand, if you want to fight the gun grabbers, you must understand this: gun grabbers do not play fair. They cheat. They lie. They pay off witnesses. I mean, like, a couple of years ago, 2001, at the state capitol, there was a bill here in Texas about banning the gun show loophole. And we went down to this big committee meeting, and they were going to have public input. And I was the first person there, literally the first person there to sign up to talk. And then they had forms to fill out, and the problem with the form is it said you had to say whether you were for or against the bill. Well, I was honest. I said I was against it. Even though I was the first person there, I never got to talk. Why? Because they took all the people, and we outnumbered the gun grabbers 20-1 at least. Packed auditorium, But they took all the people that wanted to talk against the gun-grabbing bill, and they stuck them on the bottom of the pile, you see. And then they put all the gun grabbers on the top of the pile. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. They cheat. They don't play fair. And if you want to play fair with them, you're going to lose. Okay? I mean, they pay off witnesses. At this thing we went to in 2001 at the state capitol, the gun grabbers brought some gang members, supposedly up from Houston, to testify, in other words, lie, before the committee. Now, I remember one of them just lying in his teeth. They said, "Oh, man, we go into the gun show and we just buy sacks of guns at wholesale prices, no questions asked." And after these gentlemen testified, we caught them. Alex Jones caught them. A fellow for Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership caught them. I caught some of it on my camera. We caught them being paid off in the hall right outside the committee room by the head of one of these Houston anti-gun groups. Was Texans Against Gun Violence. We caught them on tape, paying their witnesses off in cash. It was so blatant that it even appeared in the Austin American Statesman. Anti-gun witnesses paid off outside committee room. So what I'm saying is these people, they cheat, they lie, they pay off witnesses, and they break the law. Yeah, they break the law. Again, 2001, as an example, the Million Mom March had their headquarters in San Francisco. A couple of people went to look for it at the address listed on the website, and they couldn't find it. And when they did find it, they found out it was on a floor in a hospital in San Francisco, a hospital owned by the city. You had a political advocacy group living rent-free on a floor of a hospital owned by the city of San Francisco. Totally illegal. But they didn't care. Of course, they got caught and had to leave, but they cheat, they lie, they break the law. Okay? So, with the Supreme Court taking this case, it's called the Parker case, and I'm going to get into it in a little bit. I have to say, what does the Supreme Court think they're doing even taking this case? Where do they come off thinking they have the right to interpret for you what doesn't need to be interpreted? Where do they come off? And people are going, wait a minute, everybody knows that the Supreme Court is the only body in the United States that has the intelligence to tell you what the English language means. Everybody knows that. And why do you know that? Any of you attorneys out there that might be listening, why do you know that? Because you were spoon-fed that in law school. Marbury versus Madison. Oh yeah, Marbury versus Madison. The Supreme Court anointed itself with the power to make the legislature irrelevant. Yeah. Oh yeah, only the Supreme Court can tell you what the Constitution says. If the Supreme Court were to rule that red was green, your average lawyer would say, hey, red's green, because I learned it in law school. If the Supreme Court were to tell you that the sun sets in the east and rises in the west, the average lawyer would say, yep, that's what the Supreme Court says. Must be true. Well, see, we don't buy that. And one of the reasons we don't buy that is because of the Constitution of the United States of America. Look up Article 3, Section 2. Law school students going, Article 3, Section 2, what's that? Well, I'll tell you. Article 3, Section 2 says that the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in certain limited matters and appellate jurisdiction in other matters with such exceptions as the Congress shall make. Look it up. So, the Constitution says the Congress of the United States has the power to limit the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. It's unambiguous in the Constitution. So how then do they come up with this cockamamie idea that the Supreme Court gets to tell you everything what the Constitution means when they can be screened out by the Congress if Congress so decides? So anyway, the Bill of Rights, by the way, the Second Amendment, by the way, doesn't grant you anything. Get that through your head if you don't understand it. The Bill of Rights doesn't grant you anything. Your rights, including your right to effective self-defense, are yours by virtue of the Creator when you are here on the planet as a human being. That's a natural right. You have the right to self-defense. You have the right to effective self-defense. The Second Amendment doesn't grant you squat. All it does is enumerate it. The Bill of Rights was a thou shalt not for government. The Founding Fathers were going, hey, you know what? Government's really bad, and you got to chain it down, and you got to make sure it doesn't mess with your rights, because, boy, if you let them, they will. They sat around thinking, well, in our time, what has the government done to mess around with people? Well, let's see, they won't let you talk. Yeah, can't have that, so we'll put up the First Amendment there, freedom of speech. Yeah, they won't let you disseminate information. Well, let's see, freedom of the press. You know what? Well, they mess around with your religion. Okay, freedom of religion. Well, they try to take your guns away and then they shoot you. Oh, yeah, well, Second Amendment. Okay, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The whole Bill of Rights is a thou shalt not for government. And then it says later on in the Bill of Rights, hey, anything that we forgot to list here, government, you can't do that either. So the argument that the anti-gunners have that somehow the Founding Fathers stuck a collective government right in the middle of the Bill of Rights, which is all designed to protect individual freedom, is a crock. It's intellectually not there. So it is preposterous to think that the Founding Fathers in the Second Amendment said the right of a government-run body to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, when they just fought a war to kick the British out of the country with a bunch of citizen soldiers who own their own guns. So, another thing I want to point out. all you people that are under the mistaken, weird idea that the Bush administration is conservative. This decision was in the District of Columbia. People wanted to own guns in the District of Columbia in their home for self-defense. The government of the District of Columbia said no. Well, the case, they lost it. You say, well, okay, fine. So it was appealed to the appeals court in the District of Columbia. And the District of Columbia appeals court said, yeah, you do have a right to keep and bear arms. It's the Second Amendment, Constitution. Okay, so now, why didn't the Bush administration say don't appeal the decision? There's a Latin phrase, stare decisis. It means let the decision stand. Why didn't the Bush administration let the decision stand? Because it was a pro-Second Amendment, pro-individual right decision of the District Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. So any of you think that the Bush administration is pro-Second Amendment, hey, don't look at what they say. Look at what they do. They appealed the decision. All right. So, by the way, I'm nervous about the Supreme Court taking this because, you know, there's a couple of Council on Foreign Relations members on the Supreme Court. You have Breyer and Ginsburg. And, you know, if you know anything about the CFR, they're into global government and totalitarianism and all that stuff, and they don't much care for the Second Amendment. So, Second Amendment, look out. All right, a little cartoon here, show you here the importance of the Second Amendment. Right here, go to camera 2, guys. Okay, here's the importance of the Second Amendment. See, on one side there, you got the American Minuteman there in 1776 with his rifle. And then over here on the right side, you got the Chinese guy at Tiananmen Square in 1989 with his broom. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a good illustration of the importance of the Second Amendment. Okay, now, here is the article from the American Statesman that started this tirade that I'm going to be on for a while here today. High Court to decide gun rights case. This is from the Statesman on the 21st of November, written by Linda Greenhouse of the New York Times. The Supreme Court announced Tuesday that it would decide whether the Constitution guarantees individuals the right to keep guns in their homes for private use. The Supreme Court is going to decide whether the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Ridiculous. Plunging the justices into a divisive and long-running debate over how to interpret the Second Amendment's guarantee of, quote, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. They don't even put that part in there, will not be infringed. They didn't even put that part in there. Oh, well, hey, it's the paper. The Federal Appeals Court in Washington ruled last March that the Second Amendment right was an individual one, not tied to a service in a militia, and that the District of Columbia's categorical ban on handguns was therefore unconstitutional. Well, duh. You could have learned that if you just read the Second Amendment. Later on in the article, it says this. Now, it's funny. City officials said the law is designed to reduce gun violence, noting that 4 out of every 5 homicides this year was committed with a gun. Wait, Washington, D.C. has the most stringent gun laws in the whole country. It also has one of the highest murder rates with guns in the whole country. So how come you have all these homicides when it's illegal to have a gun in Washington, D.C.? Could it be that criminals don't obey the law? No. Only the law-abiding obey the law? And therefore, in Washington, D.C., criminals can just do whatever the heck they want with the innocent civilians because they know they're not armed? What a concept. Okay, well, you got to go to the enemy's camp to find out what they think about this. So I went to the Brady campaign. Those are the anti-gunners, the Brady campaign's website, to see what they said about this decision that the Supreme Court made to take this case. This is the press release from the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence. News release, statement of Brady President Paul Helmke on Supreme Court taking gun case. They released this on the 20th. Now here's the quotes from this Paul Helmke character. By agreeing to hear the appeal by the District of Columbia in the Parker-Heller case, the U.S. Supreme Court has the chance to reverse a clearly erroneous decision and make it clear that the Constitution does not prevent communities from having the gun laws they believe are needed to protect public safety. So you see right there, again, they lie. You see, according to this Helmke guy, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall be infringed. Next quote. The decision by the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals in the Parker case was an example of judicial activism at its worst. Hey, where's the vomit bag? I mean, that is so ridiculous, it's not even funny. Judicial activism is where you say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed and change it to shall be infringed. See, that's judicial activism. I mean, this is the same Supreme Court, by the way. That's one of the reasons I'm nervous about this. This is the same Supreme Court that in 2005 ruled that you don't even own your own property if a rich guy wants it and thinks he can have more tax revenue generated for it. You know, the Kelo decision. I mean, these guys are nuts. Okay, back to the quote. It ignored long-standing Supreme Court precedent. That's a big, fat lie, by the way. I'm going to prove that in a minute. Discounted the express language of the Second Amendment. God, where's the nose on this guy? You know, Pinocchio, put him to shame. And substituted its policy preferences for those of the district's elected representatives. Yeah, you see, if the district wants to pass a law that banning the Second Amendment in the district, well, then what? How dare you throw this Bill of Rights at them? You can't do that. We are hopeful that the Supreme Court will reverse this flawed ruling. And the third quote, the Supreme Court's decision in this case will be extremely significant, the most important decision on guns in nearly 70 years, and maybe the most important ever regarding the Second Amendment. Oh boy, yeah, that's what I'm worried about. Okay, so what are they talking about? We got to educate everybody. What are they talking about? They're talking about this decision right here. United States Court of Appeals. This is the Parker case. All right. For the District of Columbia, decided March the 9th, 2007, Shelley Parker et al. Appellants versus the District of Columbia and the mayor. Okay, this is the case. Now, I don't have the whole case here, but I did want to take an aside here and point something out. Now, this is an exercise in logic. Now, the anti-gunners don't like logic. They can't stand it. The logic sends them into spasms, and they don't know what to do about it. But here's some. Appellants challenge the D.C. Code, blah, blah, blah. Shelley Parker, Tracy Ambrue, Tom G. Palmer, and George Lyon want to possess handguns in their respective homes for self-defense. Jillian St. Lawrence owns a registered shotgun, but wishes to keep it assembled and unhindered by a trigger lock or similar device. Finally, Dick Heller, who is a District of Columbia special police officer permitted to carry a handgun on duty, wishes to possess one in his home. Heller applied for and was denied a registration certificate to own a handgun. So there's the basics of the case. Essentially, the appellants claim a right to possess what they describe as functional firearms, by which they mean ones that could be readily accessible to be used effectively when necessary for self-defense in the home. Why does this have to go to court? Just look in the Constitution. Okay. And this is more logic here, too. It has been suggested by some that only colonial-era firearms, e.g. single-shot pistols, are covered by the Second Amendment. But just as the First Amendment, Free Speech Clause covers modern communication devices unknown to the founding generation, e.g. radio and television. And the Fourth Amendment protects telephonic conversation from a search. The Second Amendment protects the possession of the modern-day equivalents of the colonial pistol. That's just too logical for the anti-gunners to handle. They just don't know how to handle that. Yeah. And then, of course, the decision by the appellate court. For the foregoing reasons, the judgment of the district court is reversed and the case is remanded. So that's the case, the essence of the case that got appealed to the Supreme Court, which is why we're talking about this tonight. Now, the American statesmen, the lying, pathetic rag that they are, they had to stick their nose in this. This was in the paper this morning. Right here. Camera 2 guys. Right there. Gun ownership doesn't need boosts from court. The U.S. Supreme Court has given itself the opportunity to clarify one of the longest-standing questions in constitutional jurisprudence. Does the enigmatic language of the Second Amendment make gun ownership a constitutional right? Do flowers grow above the dirt or below the dirt? I don't know. Let's try to figure that out. You know? Why do they have to have this exercise to figure out what is plain, what is obvious, what is indisputable? They got to figure this out. They got to figure out whether humans walk on 2 legs. Just do a study, you know. Do dogs have 4 legs? Do a study. We got to figure this out, you know. Enigmatic language of the Second Amendment. Enigmatic means like, we can't figure this out. Well, go read it. The one opinion that matters, that of the Supreme Court, has been clear. There you go again. This ridiculous assertion that the only opinion that matters on law in this country is that of the Supreme Court. Totally bogus BS. And then they cite U.S. versus Miller as the established law. It establishes, according to the American statesman, that the Second Amendment had nothing to do with private ownership of guns. You hear that? The American statesman says that U.S. versus Miller, the 1939 case, the last time they heard a case, has nothing to do with the private ownership of guns. Nothing. Well, we're going to fix that here in a minute. Supreme Court is usually reluctant to reverse settled law. Again, they're lying again. Settled law. Without good reason. And the justices should be reluctant now to read into the Second Amendment an enshrining of guns they don't need, and legally speaking, haven't had anyway for more than 2 centuries. That sentence doesn't even make any sense. Of course, neither does the American statesman, so, hey. So what are we talking about here? Okay, class. Time to go to class. We have here U.S. versus Miller. The last time the Supreme Court ruled in their infinite wisdom on the Second Amendment. United States versus Miller. Decided May 15th, 1939. I hadn't done this in a while, so I guess I'll just have to go over it again. This was a decision involving a sawed-off shotgun with a barrel of less than 18 inches, which was made illegal by the National Firearms Act of 1934. Okay? This Miller fella had this shotgun. He says, hey, Second Amendment. And the U.S. government says, oh, we made that one illegal. So it goes up to the Supreme Court. Now let's read this. In context, which the anti-gunners cannot stand. I know they're going to freak out. They're going to go, no, don't read the context. But I'm going to. In the absence of any evidence tending to show that possession or use of a shotgun having a barrel of less than 18 inches in length at this time has some reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia, we cannot say that the Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear arms, the right to keep and bear such an instrument. So they're saying that they didn't have any evidence that shows that a sawed-off shotgun could be used in a military application. So they couldn't say that you have a right to keep it. Now, here's the point. Jeff, you got a question?
I was just going to say, we're going to put up the congressman's numbers, and you're going to remind them that it's their responsibility to make sure they're
All right. Here's the point. 2 points on that. Number one, the reason they didn't have any evidence tending to show that possession of a sawed-off shotgun could have military applicability is because the Miller guys didn't show up for the court date. They weren't even there. It's a Supreme Court decision. The Miller guys don't even show up. So obviously they didn't get any evidence showing that the shotgun could have military applicability because they didn't show up. However, the shotgun does have military applicability. The sawed-off shotgun has military applicability. World War I, yeah. Vietnam, tunnel rats, oh yeah. Shotguns have been used by the military for a long time. But they weren't shown any evidence. Okay. With obvious purpose to assure the continuation and render possible the effectiveness of such forces, the declaration and guarantee of the Second Amendment were made. It must be interpreted and applied with that end in view. So that's where the anti-gunners stop. They say, see, you don't have an individual right to keep and bear arms, see? But you got to keep reading. The signification attributed to the term militia appears from the debates in the convention, the history and legislation of the colonies and states, and the writings of approved commentators. Anti-gunners, close your ears because you don't want to hear this. These show plainly enough that the militia comprised all males physically capable of acting in concert for the common defense. And further, that ordinarily when called for service, these men were expected to appear bearing arms supplied by themselves and of the kind in common use at the time. You mean they were supposed to have their own guns? They were supposed to supply their own guns that they own themselves privately? Oh, no. Yeah. And they're supposed to be of the kind in common use at the time. Well, shut my mouth. This means that you're supposed to own your own gun, and if you want to make sure it's constitutionally protected, make sure it's military applicable. Anti-gunners don't want to hear that. Ooh, they forgot to read that part of U.S. versus Miller, didn't they? And then they go quoting various different papers and things from the era. The American Colonies in the 17th Century, Osgood, Volume 1, Chapter 13, affirms in reference to the early system of defense in New England, quote, all the colonies, as in England, the militia system was based on the principle of an assize of arms. This implied the general obligation of all adult male inhabitants to possess arms, and with certain exceptions, cooperate in the work of defense. The obligation to possess arms. Hey, anti-gunners, did you forget to read that part too? And what do we have here? We have an act passed April 4, 1786, the New York legislature. Every able-bodied male person the age of 16 and under the age of 45, every citizen shall enrolled shall, within 3 months hereafter, provide himself at his own expense with a good musket or firelock. That means they had to go out and buy their own gun, I think. I think that's what that means. The General Assembly of Virginia, 1785, quote, if any private shall make it appear to the satisfaction of the court hereafter to be appointed for trying delinquencies under this act, that he is so poor that he cannot purchase the arms herein required, such court shall cause them to be purchased out of money arising from delinquents. Okay, here you have a deal where they're saying, you have to go out and buy yourself a gun. You got to get one. And if you're too poor to get one, we're going to get one for you. Darn. Anti-gunners, you just probably freaking out now, aren't you? That, ladies and gentlemen, is U.S. versus Miller. They said, nobody showed us a shotgun. A sawed-off shotgun could be a military weapon. Therefore, that gun we can't say is protected by the Second Amendment. If you want to make sure your gun is protected by the Second Amendment, make sure it has military applicability. That's what the Miller decision says, unambiguously. And these jerks and the statesmen, it has nothing to do with private ownerships of guns. It is settled law. See, they lie. Now, there's your congressmen and your senators and all that stuff. You need to call them up and tell them do their job to support the Second Amendment as the individual right that it was always unambiguously, not enigmatically, unambiguously intended to be. So, that's the deal. Call McCall, call Doggett, call Smith, call Carter, whoever your congressperson is. Call Kay Bailey and John Cornyn. They're both your senators if you live in Texas. Of course, our show is international now because of our website we have, simpletruthonline.net. But anyway, if you're watching this thing on the internet, call your congressman, call your senators if you live in some other state, and say, hey, support the Second Amendment as an individual right, because that's what it is, because you swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. All right.
The congressman can rein in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that's the deal. I just said this a while ago, and Jeff reminded me, I'll say it again. Article 3, Section 2, United States Constitution, the Congress has the power to limit the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court if they just have the cojones to do it. Of course, maybe the Supreme Court would interpret that differently, in this crazy world we live in. So, all right. Now, somewhat related to this, I want to show you a poster that the Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership put out. Right here. The Anti-Defamation League is anti-American. There's Abe Foxman, the head guy at the Anti-Defamation League. See, they don't like guns. They think everybody should be disarmed like his parents were so that when the Nazis killed them. What an idiot. Okay, the reason I wanted to show you this is because it reproduces a letter that was written by Louis C. Coffin, the law librarian at the Library of Congress, on July the 12th, 1968. This is a cover letter addressed to the Honorable Thomas J. Dodd, Chairman, Special Subcommittee to Investigate Juvenile Delinquency, U.S. Senate, Washington, D.C. Why do I want to read you this cover letter? Because this cover letter was sent to Dodd after Dodd sent the Library of Congress some stuff he wanted translated into English, because Senator Thomas J. Dodd, the father of the clown they got up there now, wrote the Gun Control Act of 1968. He was trying to research how to write a good gun control act, so he sent some documents to the Library of Congress to have them translated into English. Permit me to read this letter. Honorable Thomas J. Dodd. Dear Senator Dodd, your request of July 2nd, 1968, addressed to the Legislative Reference Service for the translation of several German laws, has been referred to the Law Library for attention. In compliance with your request and with reference to several telephone conversations between Ms. Frank of your office and Mr. Fred Karff, European Law Division, we are enclosing herewith a translation of the Law on Weapons of March 18th, 1938, prepared by Dr. William Solyam Fekete of that division, as well as the Xerox copy of the original German text which you supplied. This translation of the decree implementing the law on weapons on March 19, 1938, and the pertinent provisions of the federal hunting law of March 30, 1961, is in preparation and will be sent to you as soon as completed. Sincerely yours, Lewis C. Coffin, Law Librarian. Now, in case you didn't get what I just read, Senator Thomas Dodd sent a copy of the Nazi gun law of 1938 to the Library of Congress to have it translated into English to help him write our Gun Control Act of 1968. Got it? It's Nazi. It only makes sense. If you're going to write a stupid gun control act, go to the masters. Who did it the best? Well, Adolf, Uncle Adolf. Go to Uncle Adolf and figure out how it's done. And if you will look at the Gun Control Act of 1968 and the Nazi Gun Control Act of 1938, guess what? Now, got a cartoon. Got to have a cartoon here. Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership puts this up. You want to meet the Jews who are for Nazi gun control laws? Here they are. See there, you have Dianne Feinstein, Charles Schumer, Barbara Boxer, and Frank Lautenberg. All Jews, all senators, all support Nazi gun control laws. All of them. And the two on the left are Council on Foreign Relations members. Go figure. Okay? Okay. There. I have successfully defended the concept of the Second Amendment being an individual right, a task which I should never have to do because it's so blatantly obvious. The militia, as defined in 1787, is the people of the United States. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, even if the Supreme Court says different. Okay, now guess what time it is? Speaking of guns, it's time for Police State Alert. Yes, it's time for Police State Alert. Those were some loud Nazis in here. You should have heard those Nazis. I think they got all excited by this picture here of all these Jewish people that like the Nazis. Whoa. Okay. This is from the Boston Globe. Police to search for guns in homes. Oh boy, why do we have to do this? Maria Kramer, Globe staff, November 17, 2007. Boston police are launching a program that will call upon parents in high-crime neighborhoods to allow detectives into their homes without a warrant to search for guns in their children's bedrooms. The program, which is already raising questions about civil liberties, is based on the premise that parents are so fearful of gun violence and the possibility that their own teenagers will be caught up in it that they will turn to the police for help even in their own households. The program... Whoa, that thing is super loud in here. I don't know what it is with this box in here, guys. It's killing me.
What's wrong with that audio thing?
I don't know. Yeah, weird. Whatever. We got a problem with volume in here. Yeah, do something with it. Shoot it or something. Oh, don't shoot it. No, don't do that. All right, now back to this Boston Globe story. The program was unveiled yesterday by Police Commissioner Edward F. Davis. And then Thomas Nolan, a former Boston police lieutenant who now teaches criminology at Boston University, says this: I just have a queasy feeling anytime the police try to do an end run around the Constitution. The police have restrictions on their authority and ability to conduct searches. The Constitution was written with a very specific intent, and that was to keep the law out of private homes unless there was a written document signed by a judge and based on probable cause. Here, you don't have that. That was the Fourth Amendment he was talking about. Critics say they worry that some residents will be too intimidated by a police presence on their doorstep to say no to a search. And that's a very valid point. You know, you're kind of an uneducated poor person and 3 cops show up at your house. Do you mind if we search your child's bedroom? Our biggest concern is the notion of informed consent, said maybe Amy Reichbach, a racial justice advocate at the American Civil Liberties Union. Quote, people might not understand the implications of weapons being tested or any contraband being found. Yeah, duh. But Davis said the point of the program, dubbed Safe Homes, is to make streets safer, not to incarcerate people. Yes, give up your liberties in order to obtain security. Do the exact opposite of what the Founding Fathers said. Do the exact opposite of what Benjamin Franklin said. Those who give up essential liberty in order to obtain temporary safety deserve neither. You know, forget about that. Just give up your liberties and let the Gestapo come into your house and search your house. And if they find their guns, I guess they can arrest your sorry behind, huh? At their discretion. Of course. That's what it says right here later on in the article. It says police will rely primarily on tips from neighbors. Ah, the Stasi. Yeah, I can just see old Gladys Kravitz across the street. Abner, those people have guns in their house?
Back off the mic a little bit.
That's the Stasi. If drugs are found, it will be up to the officer's discretion whether to make an arrest. One of the first to back this police guy was the Reverend Jeffrey L. Brown. What I like about this program is it really is a tool to empower the parent. It's a way in which they can get a hold of the household and say, I don't want that in my house. If they don't want it in their house, then that's their job. It's not their job to call the cops in there to get their whole family arrested. Oh, man, talk about it. Talk about police state alert. All right, what else we got for police state alert? Oh, yeah, we have a clip for you guys. This is, you ready to go on that, Jeff? This is from the other day, a Houston TV station caught the Houston police doing something nefarious and disgusting, and this is about a spy drone plane that the Houston police were trying to secretly test. Go ahead and play that clip, Jeff.
HPD wanted to keep under wraps, and now they're being just a little vague at how they're going to use it. KPRC Local 2 investigative reporter Stephen Dean gives you the first look at the plane that could soon be watching you from above.
Neighbors accustomed to livestock and wide-open land had no idea what to make of all this. Black trucks, satellite dishes, a radar swirling, and a portable launch pad with something covered up. At the entrance to this Waller County ranch was a Houston police roadblock, checking all the dignitaries arriving for this secret test. Their invitation spelled out no media allowed. We tried to ask this HPD lieutenant on his way back out.
They'll be coming out here in a minute.
They all gathered around the launch pad, big shots with police departments from all over the Houston area. And now, the show they came for, the test you were not supposed to see. It's an unmanned drone aircraft. HPD, the Federal Department of Homeland Security, and other invited guests all watching to see how this drone could be used for police work in and around Houston.
We tracked that drone from News Chopper 2, and that drone was able to use a high-powered camera to track us. Those cameras can actually look into people's homes or even follow them in
issue is going to be law enforcement using this, and when, by using these drones, are they conducting a search in which they would need probable cause or a warrant.
The military's been dropping bombs and using drones for secret war zone surveillance for years. And last month, the California wildfires were snuffed out with drones joining the other firefighting tankers in the air. This drone is made by a Washington state firm called In Situ. They weigh about 40 pounds, but they can carry 15 pounds more in police gear. They can stay airborne over Houston 15 to 24 hours without landing.
I wasn't ready to publicize this.
HPD quickly hustled together a news conference when it realized our cameras were there for the entire secret test.
Potential public safety applications include mobility, evacuations, homeland security, search and rescue, as well as tactical.
Executive Assistant Chief Martha Montalvo admits that could mean covert police action, but she says it's too early to tell what else HPD will do with the aircraft. Maybe these guys know. We saw many ticket writers from HPD's radar task force, so we asked, are these drones headed for ticketing speeders from the sky?
I'm not ruling anything out.
Back at the secret test site, police helicopter pilots claimed the entire airspace was restricted. They even threatened our Local 2 Investigates pilot with action from the FAA if we didn't leave. But we checked with FAA several times, and there never was a flight restriction. That leaves some to wonder whether the police are now ready to use terrorism fears since 9/11 to push the envelope even further into our private lives.
We see that some of these technologies that were being used in the aftermath of 9/11 that we thought were necessary to protect our security in that time are now being used to diminish privacy in other contexts, and that is extremely worrisome.
HPD says it'll tackle privacy and illegal search issues later. Headquarters is hoping to begin policing Houston with this new tool in about 7 months, but more test flights are needed. No word yet on when the next flight is planned or whether it'll be treated as a big secret like the one captured by our cameras. Stephen Dean, KPRC Local 2.
Nicely done. Now, our investigation isn't over. Tomorrow morning, we look into a past crash of an unmanned craft in another city and what it means as HPD prepares to fly them over our homes and schools. That's tomorrow at 6:50 a.m. And remember, if you
all right.
call the tip line.
How about that?
223-TIPS, or feel free to email local.
There we go. How about that? Now, where is the probable cause in flying a drone over and just pointing it wherever they want to and looking into your house and all that stuff? Guess what? There isn't any. Just totally ripe for abuse, completely. And of course, the fact that they were trying to hide that thing doesn't bode well for HPD either. And you know, these little drones flying around, buzzing around, looking at you. That's Orwellian. That's just plain flat wrong. So it's part of Police State Alert. Okay, now we're going to change topics a little bit. We're going to morph into Ron Paul here in a few minutes. I want to point out a couple of things. We have another clip coming up here in a minute. You're just going to love this. But before we do that, talk about Ron Paul's competition. You know, John McCain was supposed to be one of the front runners, and he has just gotten an endorsement. This is funny, I guess, ironically funny, from Thomas Keene, the chairman of the 911 Commission. Pardon me while I laugh. This is from NBC here. Republican Tom Keene Sr., the former New Jersey governor and co-chair of the 911 Commission, today endorsed McCain, citing the Arizona senator's success in pushing recommendations of the 911 Commission's report through the Senate. Quote, "This is the first time in 20 years I've endorsed anyone on the national level, and I usually stay out of these things. This is an endorsement, frankly, of conscience." Conscience from Thomas Keene, the chairman of the 911 Commission, who told me point blank last year that the matter of finding out who financed the deaths of 3,000 people on September 11th was of little practical significance because it just cost so little money. Same Thomas Keene. Oh, by the way, that clip is in Loose Change's final cut, by the way. The same Thomas Keene who told me that he didn't know anything about the collapse of World Trade Center Building Number 7 even though that was a big fat lie, and that he said that there wasn't a loss of life in that building, even though there was. And so this 911 commission, chaired by this clown, didn't look into the collapse of a 47-story steel skyscraper that no plane hit. This guy has a conscience. Okay, well, he's endorsed McCain. What does that tell you? Now, the other endorsement, okay, look, this is funny. This is great. This book, David Rockefeller Memoirs. Let's get a close-up of that right there so we can see it right here. David Rockefeller Memoirs. This is David Rockefeller's book. Okay? He wrote it. I bought this on Amazon.com for 70 cents plus freight, because that's about what it's worth. Page 405. I'm going to read this because I'm going to show you a clip. Just awesome. David Rockefeller, Mr. CFR, proud internationalist, he says this. This is his words. For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents such as my encounter with Castro to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that is a charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. Okay, that's David Rockefeller in his own book saying that he is guilty of the charge of conspiring with others around the world to work against the best interest of the United States in order to form a one-world government. David Rockefeller, in his own words, in his own book, on page 405. Okay? Now, with that in mind, watch one of Ron Paul's competitors for the presidency of the United States, the front runner, the conservative Rudy Giuliani, giving David Rockefeller a United Nations award in 1999. Now, all you conservative Republicans who think that Giuliani is your guy, we all know how you hate the UN. Here's Mayor Rudy Giuliani giving David Rockefeller a United Nations award. Go ahead and play it.
The Medal of the Business Council for the United Nations is presented every year to an individual who has made a significant contribution to the United Nations and to world peace. Past recipients include Margaret Thatcher, Thomas Pickering, Javier Perez de Cuellar, Mikhail Gorbachev, Ronald Reagan, and George Bush. This evening, the prestige of this famous award is enhanced, again, as it's bestowed upon one of the formidable figures of the 20th century, a force for freedom and peace in the world, David Rockefeller. Please stand up there. You hold that. I'm going to list just a very few of David's contributions. He was the founder of the America Society, an organization that promotes inter-American cooperation. He helped found the Trilateral Commission, designed to promote understanding and cooperation among the nations of North America, Western Europe, and Japan. He was instrumental in creating the International Executive Service Corps, a group of volunteers from the private sector who provide technical and managerial assistance to private enterprise in developing nations. For 15 years, he served as the chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations. Among other international achievements, David Rockefeller is the honorary chairman of the Japan Society, an honorary trustee of the International House, and a member of the Advisory Council of the Bilderberg Conference. David, as the mayor of New York City, I want to thank you very, very much for bringing the United Nations to New York City. As a citizen of the United States, I want to thank you very much for all that you have done for America, you and your family, and as a citizen of the world, thank you for everything you've done for world peace.
Okay. Oh, David Rockefeller, CFR, past president, Bilderberger, founder of the Trilateral Commission. Oh, thank you for everything you have done for world peace. Back to David.
He actually said Bilderberg,
yeah.
Or they deny that it exists.
Yeah, they say he said Bilderberg. There we go. Now let's read David Rockefeller one more time. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that is the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. Now, guess what? Sounds like Rudy Giuliani just thinks that David Rockefeller is the best thing since sliced toast. How can he possibly be a conservative Republican if he's glorifying David Rockefeller and the United Nations has given him a UN award, when every American who studied the UN knows that the United Nations is nothing but sugar-coated totalitarianism, anti-American, vile, disgusting, sugar-coated totalitarianism. All right, well, we're out of time on Simple Truth. We're going to get out of here with our Amigos exit clip. For Jeff Kantoff and Kelly Taylor, my name is Bob Dacy, and we'll be seeing you next week. Let's ride, amigos. Vamonos. Let's get out of here.
Our reward is that justice has been done.
And remember, wherever there is injustice, you will find us.
Wherever there is suffering, we'll be there.
Wherever liberty is threatened, you will find the Three Amigos. Let's play! Let's ride! One for each other and all for one. The three brave amigos are we. Brother to brother and everyone, a brave amigo.